I think my mother did exactly the right thing. I think it's absolutely extraordinary.
The luncheon had already begun when Princess Anne entered the state dining room and saw the one thing no one had expected. Resting on Queen Camilla's head was the Queen Mother's most fiercely protected tiara, a jewel Anne believed had never been formally released for her use. The Princess Royal stopped beside the table, refused to take her seat, and ordered the luncheon halted. Then, in front of Charles, William, and stunned courtiers, she demanded to know who had opened the vault. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Anne gripped the back of her chair until her knuckles lost their color. She did not shout. She did not need to. The state dining room at Windsor Castle fell silent, with Charles, Camilla, William, Catherine, relatives and officials frozen around the family luncheon. The Princess Royal, a title given to the monarch's eldest daughter, held no authority over the queen consort, yet everyone understood why her words landed like an order. Camilla remained seated. She touched the tiara and said it had been approved. Her voice stayed steady, but the pause betrayed her. This was not a crown of diamonds. The jewel had belonged to the Queen Mother, the late matriarch whose wartime strength and loyalty to the crown made her a symbol of endurance. To Anne, it carried something personal, childhood memories, approval, and a bond she believed the palace had no right to reassign. Charles felt every face turn toward him. The king understood the trap: defend his wife, and he would appear to dismiss his sister's claim over family memory. Support Anne, and he would humiliate Camilla before people whose loyalty she had spent years trying to earn. William said nothing, but he watched his aunt's expression change. Her anger was real. So was the hurt beneath it. A senior equerry stepped forward with the luncheon jewelry schedule. An equerry is a royal officer who assists family members and manages formal duties. He checked the page once, then again. The listed piece was not the Queen Mother's tiara. A different jewel had been approved. Camilla lowered her hand. Anne's grip tightened. Someone had changed the order. Someone had opened the vault. As William studied Anne's pale face, he realized she was not reacting to a broken rule. She was looking at the tiara as though it had reopened an old betrayal. Anne's command had stopped the luncheon, but the silence around that table revealed something far more dangerous. This was not the first time the tiara had stood at the center of a private royal dispute. To the courtiers watching from the walls, the confrontation appeared to be about a diamond tiara. To Anne, Camilla, and Charles, it was about belonging. One woman saw the jewel as a final connection to the grandmother who had shaped her sense of duty. Another saw it as proof that she had finally been accepted into the royal line. Between them stood a king whose smallest decision could reopen decades of grief, resentment, and unfinished family judgment. Anne kept one hand on the chair as an old memory returned with painful force. She had been a child when the Queen Mother fastened a small brooch to her coat before a family engagement. The older woman had smiled, adjusted it carefully, and told her that jewels were never meant to display vanity. They carried duty. They reminded the wearer that every privilege came with a burden. Anne had never forgotten those words, because the late matriarch had admired her discipline, her lack of performance, and her willingness to work without demanding praise. Camilla touched the side of the tiara and leaned toward Charles. Her voice dropped until only he could hear. She told him she had worn it because she believed the family had finally stopped treating her as temporary. Becoming queen had given her rank, but rank was not the same as acceptance. The queen consort was the wife of the reigning king, yet symbols connected to inherited royal history still carried a boundary she could feel every time a jewel was withheld or a family memory was discussed without her. Charles looked at his wife, then at his sister. He understood both wounds, and that made the moment worse. Anne believed something sacred had been taken without consent. Camilla believed she was still being punished for a past she could never change. The king's silence satisfied neither woman. William moved closer to the equerry and quietly requested the private jewelry notes. The prince found Anne's earlier written instruction within minutes. She had asked that the tiara remain unworn until a memorial exhibition honoring the Queen Mother's life and charitable work. A memorial exhibition is a public display created to preserve and explain the legacy of someone who has died. Anne had not claimed the jewel for herself. She had protected it for a specific purpose. Catherine watched Camilla carefully. The princess noticed that her hands were trembling, despite her calm expression. That fear suggested more than embarrassment. Someone had clearly given the queen assurances strong enough to make her believe the decision could not be challenged. Charles finally asked who had authorized the change. Anne turned toward him before any official could answer. Her face hardened, but her voice remained low. "This did not begin today," she said. "It began months ago, with a conversation you were never told about. The jewel had wounded 3 people for 3 different reasons, yet the path that brought it to Camilla's head began with one private promise made behind a closed palace door. 6 months before the luncheon, a quiet meeting took place in the library at Clarence's house. No cameras recorded it. No public announcement followed. Yet one sentence spoken that afternoon would eventually freeze an entire royal dining room. Camilla had asked whether the Queen Mother's tiara could be considered for a future state occasion. The keeper of the jewels did not refuse her. Instead, he told her that once the king approved a broader review, the piece could be treated as available, and Camilla remembered that answer as a promise. Camilla sat opposite Sir Malcolm Harrow while winter rain pressed against the windows. He served as the royal jewelry keeper, the official responsible for recording, protecting, and preparing historic pieces for approved use. After Charles became king, palace staff had begun reviewing which jewels would be worn, displayed, or preserved during the new reign. To the Queen, that process promised clarity. To Anne, it threatened to turn personal family history into a simple list of available objects. Sir Malcolm opened the inventory and listened as Camilla asked whether the tiara could be worn at a diplomatic reception. She chose her words carefully, but he heard the need beneath them. The Queen wanted more than permission. She wanted proof that her position was no longer conditional. "When the review is signed, there should be no obstacle," Harrow replied. Camilla left the library relieved. For years, she had carried the duties of royal life while feeling that some symbols remained beyond her reach. His answer sounded final. It felt like acceptance, spoken in the language of palace authority, and she trusted it because the keeper had never warned her that another member of the family had already placed a restriction on the jewel. Anne learned about the conversation days later through a documented account filed by an assistant curator. She found Harrow in a Windsor corridor and stopped directly in his path. The princess told him that administrative access did not equal emotional consent. Charles could control the collection as sovereign, the reigning monarch with final authority over official royal property. But the Queen Mother's wishes still mattered, especially when a jewel had been reserved for a memorial exhibition. Harrow defended himself at first. Then fear entered his voice. He knew Camilla had understood his words as approval, and he knew correcting her could damage his standing inside the new household. That fear changed everything. Sir Malcolm returned to the inventory and removed one sentence. The tiara was reserved for memorial use, pending family consultation. The alteration was small, but its meaning was enormous. It erased Anne's warning and made the jewel appear unrestricted. On the morning of the luncheon, an unsigned instruction reached the vault. It ordered staff to replace Camilla's approved tiara with the Queen Mother's piece. The message contained no name, yet it arrived early enough to guarantee the substitution, and precisely when someone already knew Anne would attend. What had begun as an ambiguous promise became a deliberate substitution, and when Anne finally demanded the truth, there was nowhere left for the palace to hide it. Anne did not raise her voice. She did something more unsettling. She walked to the center of the table, placed both hands on the polished wood, and asked Camilla to remove the tiara. Every chair remained still. Charles warned his sister that the matter could be handled privately, but Anne refused. The jewel had been worn publicly before the family, she said, and the truth behind it would be faced in the same room. The silence became unbearable. Untouched plates sat before the guests. The service doors remained closed, and attendants had been ordered to wait outside until the family settled the matter. Anne held no constitutional power over Camilla, meaning she could not command the queen through law or official rank. Her influence came from something harder to challenge: a lifetime of duty and a reputation for never trading principle for comfort. Anne looked directly at Camilla. She told her that wearing the tiara without consultation had changed remembrance into possession. The Queen Mother's memory, she said, could not be claimed simply because a vault had been opened. Camilla rose slowly. Her hands trembled, but her voice did not. She told Anne she was tired of carrying the burdens of queenship while being denied its symbols. She attended the ceremonies, absorbed the criticism, stood beside Charles, and accepted every demand placed upon her. Yet whenever history became personal, the family still treated her as though she were borrowing a place that could be taken back. Charles pushed his chair away from the table. He ordered the exchange to end. The king feared the confrontation was becoming too cruel, but William stepped forward before anyone could leave. William placed the altered inventory page beside the untouched place setting. The prince had obtained it through the documented jewelry records, and the evidence was impossible to dismiss. The sentence reserving the tiara for Anne's memorial exhibition had been removed before the luncheon. Someone had not merely misunderstood a promise. Someone had changed the official history. Sir Malcolm Harrow was brought into the room. His face had lost all color. The jewelry keeper admitted that he had removed the line after pressure from a senior member of Camilla's household. He said the request had been framed as protection for the queen, not deception against the king. Charles demanded a name. Harrow lowered his eyes. He could not say it. Anne lifted the inventory page and slid it across the table toward her brother. Her anger had become colder now, more dangerous. "This is no longer about what Camilla wore," she said. "It is about who believed they could rewrite royal memory without you knowing." The confrontation had stripped away the ceremony, but the true power behind the substitution was still protected by palace rank and the fear of speaking one name aloud. The royal vault could not be opened by desire alone. Every removal required a chain of custody, a written purpose, and the approval of officials whose careers depended on never making a visible mistake. Yet the Queen Mother's tiara had passed through those safeguards in less than an hour. Someone had converted a private wish into an official instruction. As Charles read the access record, set down his glasses, and stopped speaking, the room understood that the order had come from dangerously close to the throne. Charles dismissed the luncheon guests and carried the file into the oak room. He read the vault record once, then again, hoping the initials might somehow change. They did not. Every historic jewel required an approved schedule, a signed vault log, a custodian to release it, a security escort to carry it, and final confirmation from the sovereign's household, the offices that manage the monarch's daily duties in his name. The system existed to prevent exactly this kind of private interference. The king turned the page face down. The approving initials belonged to Lady Helena Vane, Camilla's private secretary. A private secretary is the senior aide who controls access, correspondence, and official decisions for a royal household. Charles had trusted that office because much of the monarchy's daily authority moved through such people. He remained the final power, but they shaped what reached him, what carried his name, and what quietly became policy before he ever saw it. Camilla entered without waiting to be announced. She saw the record and immediately denied ordering any false approval. Her voice broke, only when Charles read the wording aloud. Vane had written that the king had raised no objection during a private conversation. He could remember no such exchange. Charles felt betrayed twice. His authority had been borrowed, and his wife's need had been used to justify it. Camilla admitted telling Vane that she could not endure another public occasion where her position appeared conditional. She had spoken from frustration, not instruction. The Queen insisted she had never asked anyone to alter a record or place words in Charles's mouth. Still, the admission landed heavily. Her pain had opened the door, even if another person had chosen to walk through it. Lady Helena Vane was summoned. She stood before Charles, Camilla, and Anne, with her hands locked together. In a recorded palace interview, she confessed that she had authorized the substitution to protect the Queen from what she called a calculated humiliation by Anne's side of the family. She believed the tiara would force acceptance before anyone could object. Charles ordered her out. Anne watched the door close, then turned toward Camilla. Removing one official would not repair the damage, she warned, if the jewel remained on her head. The signature had been exposed, and the hidden decision uncovered. But the most painful consequence would begin only when Camilla was forced to choose between the tiara and her place within the family. Camilla stood before a mirror in a private withdrawing room, while two attendants waited behind her. For the first time that afternoon, she looked neither defiant nor regal. She looked exhausted. Her fingers reached for the tiara, stopped, then tried again. Outside the door, the luncheon remained suspended, and the family waited. When the jewel finally lifted from her hair, the gesture lasted only seconds, but everyone understood that something larger than diamonds had been taken from the Queen. Camilla held the tiara for a moment, before placing it inside its case. A withdrawing room is a private chamber used by members of the royal family to step away from a formal gathering. Here, far from the frozen table, she no longer had rank to protect her from the shame. Two attendants remained nearby, but she dismissed them with a small motion. Only after the door closed did her control collapse. Charles acted quickly. He ordered the jewel returned to the vault, shortened the luncheon, and cancelled the official photographs. Those decisions mattered, because the portrait would have become a permanent royal record, turning an unauthorized choice into something history might later treat as accepted fact. The king also suspended Lady Helena Vane from household duties and removed Sir Malcolm Harrow from active custody of the collection, pending an internal review, a formal palace investigation into how the rules had been broken. Anne remained in the dining room. She stared at Camilla's empty chair and felt no triumph. The princess had defended the Queen Mother's memory, yet the pain left behind disturbed her. She had wanted the tiara removed. She had not wanted another woman broken beneath it. Catherine entered quietly with new information. She had examined the documented schedule and discovered that the altered version had been prepared before Anne confirmed she would attend the luncheon. The substitution had not simply been designed to provoke the Princess Royal. Someone had planned to place the jewel on Camilla regardless of who witnessed it. William found something worse. The prince uncovered a second instruction requesting that the Queen Mother's tiara appear in the official luncheon portrait. The wording was precise. It called the jewel part of the Queen's approved ceremonial collection. Had the photograph been released, the palace could later point to it as proof that the family had accepted the decision. Charles read the instruction without speaking. Camilla returned moments later, her eyes swollen but her voice steady. She did not ask him to defend her. She asked for Anne. The Queen wanted a private meeting with no aides, no secretaries, and no advisors. For once, she said, no one else would speak in her name. The jewel was back inside the vault, but Camilla no longer wanted officials to explain her actions. She wanted Anne to hear directly why wearing it had mattered so desperately. That evening, Anne entered a small sitting room at Windsor and found Camilla waiting without a crown, an aide, or even a prepared statement. The queen had removed every visible symbol of rank. Between them sat the empty tiara case. For several moments, neither woman spoke. Then Camilla admitted what she had refused to say at the luncheon. She had wanted the jewel because she believed wearing something loved by the Queen Mother might finally silence the judgment surrounding her marriage. Camilla kept her hands folded as Anne took the chair opposite her. No secretaries waited outside with notes. No king stood between them. No written minutes would preserve safer versions of what they said. Written minutes are the official record of a formal royal meeting. But this conversation belonged only to the two women, and the decades of pain neither palace office had been able to settle. Anne watched her carefully. She had survived royal expectation through discipline, hard work, and a refusal to ask for affection. Camilla had survived it differently, through compromise, endurance, and years of public hostility. One had protected herself by becoming unmovable. The other had learned to keep standing while the world questioned whether she belonged. Camilla finally confessed that she had mistaken access for acceptance. She believed the tiara could prove she was no longer outside the family's history, looking in through a locked door. Wearing it had felt like permission to stop apologizing for her place beside Charles. Losing it before the entire family had made her realize how fragile that belief had been. Anne lowered her eyes toward the closed case. Her anger had not come from protocol alone. The princess admitted she was grieving. Each time a personal object was reassigned, explained away, or folded into a new reign, she feared the Queen Mother's memory was being softened until nothing private remained. She had not been defending diamonds. She had been defending the last pieces of someone she loved. Camilla then disclosed, in the private recorded account later preserved for Charles, that Lady Helena Vane had never shown her Anne's memorial request. The former secretary had called it an attempt to limit the Queen and deliberately withheld it. Had Camilla known the truth, she said, she would never have worn the jewel at that luncheon. Anne opened the case and touched the velvet edge. Then she made an offer neither woman had expected. The tiara would lead the memorial exhibition, and Camilla would stand beside her at its opening. Not as its owner, but as part of the family honoring it. Camilla accepted. Together, they returned to Charles and William. The king rose when he saw them enter side by side, while the prince understood that no official ruling could have created what had happened in that room. Their agreement did not erase the humiliation. But when Anne and Camilla walked back into the room together, the monarchy's response shifted from punishment toward accountability. By sunrise, the cancelled luncheon portrait had become the most discussed royal image never taken. Yet one photograph did emerge from Windsor. Anne and Camilla leaving through the same doorway, neither smiling, their hands almost touching as they descended the steps. It captured no triumph and no defeat. It showed consequence. Across Britain, the image transformed a private argument over a tiara into a public debate about memory, legitimacy, forgiveness, and who has the right to inherit royal history. Charles watched the first broadcasts in silence. The palace had confirmed that the luncheon ended early. The Queen Mother's tiara had been returned to the vault, and a full review of historic jewelry procedures was underway. A palace review is an internal investigation used to examine how official rules were followed or broken. The statement was careful, but the story had already escaped the control of careful words. The coverage split the family into competing symbols. Anne became the defender of tradition. Camilla became the woman confronting exclusion. Charles became the king accused of governing the institution more firmly than his own household. Each version contained part of the truth, and that made the crisis harder to dismiss. Camilla read the headlines alone. Several reduced her private confession to ambition, as though she had wanted only diamonds and status. The Queen felt the old judgment return with brutal speed. Years of service disappeared beneath a single image of the tiara, and once again, strangers claimed to know the darkest reason behind every choice she made. Anne felt no victory. The The princess saw commentators praising her as though she had defeated another woman in battle. That language unsettled her, because the private meeting at Windsor had changed the meaning of the confrontation. She had protected the Queen Mother's memory, but she no longer believed Camilla had acted from simple greed. A crowd gathered opposite Windsor Station, around a newsstand carrying the fictional London Chronicle. Its front page showed the two women leaving together beneath the headline, "The Tiara, the Standoff, the Truce." Commuters stopped to read it. Some praised Anne's courage. Others pointed to Camilla's exhausted expression and said the photograph looked less like surrender than survival. The palace answered before the debate could harden. A formal statement announced that the Queen Mother's tiara would lead a memorial exhibition, jointly opened by Anne and Camilla. The decision confirmed their private agreement and denied the public the simple victory and defeat story it had expected. Charles folded the newspaper and summoned the household officials responsible for the altered records. The king had seen the wound exposed and the first sign of healing. Now he faced the final choice: protect the palace from embarrassment or force it to remember exactly how the failure had happened. The public had seen the wound and the first sign of reconciliation, but the monarch still had to decide whether the palace would bury the failure or change because of it. 3 weeks later, the Queen Mother's tiara rested beneath glass instead of on a royal head. Anne stood on one side of the exhibition case. Camilla stood on the other. Charles watched from several steps behind them as the doors opened to the public. The same jewel that had divided the family now carried a written message approved by them all. Royal treasures did not belong to the person wearing them. They belonged to the history, duty, and memory the wearer was expected to protect. Charles had completed the internal review and imposed a new rule. Any personally significant jewel connected to a deceased royal would now require written consultation with the family before it could be reassigned. Written consultation meant that the views of those closest to the former owner had to be formally recorded before approval was granted. The king understood why this mattered. Authority without memory had allowed grief to be treated like an administrative problem. The consequences were final. Sir Malcolm Harrow retired from his position as royal jewelry keeper. Lady Helena Vane permanently left Camilla's household. Every altered inventory entry was restored to its original wording, including Anne's request that the tiara remain reserved for the memorial exhibition. The palace could not erase what had happened, but it could stop the false version from becoming history. Anne arrived before the exhibition opened and found Camilla standing beside the case. The princess thanked her quietly for agreeing that the jewel should be displayed rather than claimed. Her words held no triumph. She now understood that the queen had not worn it simply from vanity, and Camilla understood that Anne had never objected simply to wound her. Camilla looked toward the tiara and admitted that she no longer needed the Queen Mother's jewels to prove her position. Acceptance gained through pressure, she said, would never have felt real. The queen had entered the crisis believing possession could silence doubt. She left it, knowing that belonging could not be forced through diamonds. Charles placed a handwritten note inside the exhibition archive. An archive is a protected collection of records, preserved so future generations can understand what happened. In that note, the king acknowledged that his failure to communicate had allowed Anne's grief, Camilla's insecurity, and the ambition of palace officials to collide. William read the message before the doors opened. The prince recognized the deeper lesson immediately. The monarchy survived not by pretending conflict had never happened, but by turning private failure into clearer duty. Anne's intervention was never truly a victory over Camilla. It defended the principle that royal history could not be seized, edited, or worn into submission. The Queen's decision to remove the tiara proved that dignity could emerge from humiliation, while Charles's reforms ensured the jewel would never again become a weapon between them. The luncheon had begun with an empty chair, a frozen table, and a tiara worn without consent. It ended with the family standing together before that same jewel, no longer fighting over possession. The monarchy had delivered its final verdict. Crowns may grant rank, but only humility protects legacy. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.